I think it's fair to say most fans were probably resigned to the fact that the championship wasn't looking like it's gonna go to the wire. Welcome back, guys, to the channel for my Las Vegas Grand Prix review for 2025. And my word, if I was making this video maybe a few hours ago, I'd probably be saying this race was, it was decent but not very consequential. But after all of the goings on with the stewards room, it's really made this weekend turn on its head in terms of how consequential this is for the championship going to the last two races. And that's why I'd like to start with a bit of a different order than I normally would, in that I'm going to start with the question, is championship back on? And absolutely it is. I think after qualifying on Saturday for Las Vegas, I think it's fair to say most fans were probably resigned to the fact that the championship wasn't looking like it's gonna go to the wire, because Lando Norris did a very good lap in the rain to take pole, and it just, even if Max Verstappen won, it just didn't feel like Lando had the opportunity to lose a lot of points to Max or Oscar. But with the two DSQs, as you can see, both drivers were checked, both drivers were found guilty of excessive plank wear. So with those two DSQs, it's really spiced up the championship, with both Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri 24 points behind Lando Norris in the championship, with 58 available, 50 from two races and 8 from a sprint race. And it's just brought some extra life back into the season, really, because, like I said, after the first hour after the race, having Max Verstappen winning the race comfortably, but he only gained 7 points on Lando, and it would have been, I believe, 42 points between Max and Lando in the championship. And at that point, it was a shame, because that kind of drive from Max should have been more exciting than it was, but just the fact that it didn't really result in much in the championship was unfortunate. But with this massive 25-point swing in Verstappen's favour, it really put so much pressure on these last two races. And I think it's going to be amazing, because I'm an avid supporter, I suppose, of, I think Max Verstappen is going to be very strong at Qatar. I know a lot of people say it's going to be a McLaren track, and I think McLaren are going to be very strong there, assuming that this plank wear thing is just a one-off. I think McLaren will be strong. However, I do think people are seeming to forget that McLaren had this level of advantage of a car last year at Qatar, and Max Verstappen quite comfortably won that race last year, even with the pole position taken away from him and given to George Russell. So I think Qatar is looking like a very interesting race, because I do genuinely think Max Verstappen will come out of that with a points advantage on the McLarens. And then it just makes it all go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi, as, well, it's giving 2021 vibes from the last few races in this season. And it really needed it to have it going down to the wire like this, because it just makes it so much more exciting. And I'm sure all of us as fans are just, especially with it being a triple header, are just in extreme eager anticipation of what's going to happen next. And I think the only sort of camp of people who will be a bit, not disappointed, but like, it's not looking good for, is obviously the Oscar Piastri fans, in the sense that Forgetting the two DSQs, I just think the performance today was really, really like nail in the coffin sense of he doesn't really have a chance of winning this. It just seems like he's fallen off to a level where you don't really see him coming back from it because he just had such a lonesome, woeful weekend, really, in the sense that he got stuck behind Kimi Antonelli, who was on. I'll talk about him more in a bit. But he was on, I think, 48 lap old hard tyres at the end, and Piastri couldn't overtake him in a McLaren that technically finished second on the road with his teammate. I mean, yeah, it's not looking good for Piastri in these last two races, but mathematically he is the same amount of points behind as Max Verstappen now. So he is still very much in it. They're both within a race win, and it's all to play for. But with the sort of DSQ drama talked about, I'll now kind of go back into the usual rhythm of talking about the weekend as a whole. And that starts with my Rawsome driver of the weekend. And to me, there's only really one standout driver, and that's Kimi Antonelli. I mean, I believe he qualified 17th, and going 17th to 3rd, yes, it technically was 5th, because, 4th, I mean, because of the penalties. No, 5th, because he had a 5-second penalty, sorry. So technically it was a 5th place, but the DSQs, it is a podium for Kimi from 17th on the grid. And as I said, with his strategy, he had the oldest hard tyres off the field, I think. Maybe Sonoda was close, but very, very old hard tyres. And he just kept the pace up. He was quicker than Russell at the end, who had a conventional strategy. And I just think these last few weekends have been massively impressive from Kimi, in the sense that he had a really, really poor mid part of the season, and there's no sort of sugarcoating that. It was really bad from him. But in these last few races, he has been either beating or very close to George Russell, and he's had 2 podiums in the last 2 races now. 3 if you include a sprint podium. So he's on the up and up, and definitely someone to look out for next year, because on a clean slate with a Mercedes that's potentially a very strong car, I think that George Russell sort of advantage in the driver pairing is fading away drastically, and we could see Kimi Antonelli fighting for a championship next year, which I'm all for seeing. But that leads us on to my extinct driver of the weekend. And I do think there's maybe 2 in contention for this. I would include Oscar Piastri, but because he's been on that form for a few weekends, I won't choose him. But my extinct driver of the weekend is Gabriel Bortoleto, for 2 weeks on the bounce, actually. Because I think most people have seen the crash that he had. If not, go watch it. But it's just such a F1 game, open lobby kind of move. Like, it was terrible. And he has taken accountability for it. I don't really see that as like a big sort of, oh wow, he took accountability, because it was such a blatant, it was his fault that, like, you're kind of an idiot if you don't say it's your fault. But yeah, absolutely terrible dive bomb into the first corner. Ruined about 4 drivers' races. I think Albon, Stroll, Gasly, maybe Colapinto got affected by it. And yeah, just a really rookie move. And yeah, of course, he's a rookie, but he's coming towards the end of his first full season. And the last couple races, the sort of Gabriel Bortoleto momentum and hype has just completely fallen off a cliff. Because it was only just back in Mexico where he had a really strong drive. But in Brazil and now Las Vegas, he's just had some really, really bad weekends. And I hope to see him pick it up, but I think Qatar, for all of the rookies, but also Gabriel Bortoleto, I think that's going to be a really testing track, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the rookies off the pace compared to their teammates at Qatar, just due to how physically difficult it is as a track and conditions. But that's my extinct driver of the weekend, and now I'll just do a sort of brief race review, where it's I think it was a decent race at Las Vegas. I do think 2023 was the best we've had at Las Vegas. I think this was kind of on 2024 levels, if you include the drama of the DSQs. Just kind of unfortunate that, once again, Pirelli bulletproof tyres, like Antonelli doing the whole race on hard tyres, easy one-stop strategy. It just wasn't the best setup. Like, qualifying had this sort of gave everyone the imagination this was going to be some amazing race, and I do think it kind of fell a bit flat from that. However, I do think we had a couple decent battles and like bits of action in the race. Of course, like the first lap chaos with like all of the crashes between Bortoletto and Lawson and stuff. That was interesting. But I do think overall it was a bit of a average race. And there is a couple of drivers' races that I'd like to talk about. And I'd like to start that with Franco Colapinto, in the sense that I'm kind of getting sick of... Obviously, he's had his contracts renewed for next year. But I really think, like, he is not good. Like, I don't think he deserves to be in that seat next year, if I'm perfectly honest. And I know people have been saying that, oh, well, he's close to Gasly, but I'm sorry, he hasn't shown anything. He's been here since Imola, and I know that car isn't good. It's not consistently good, even though Gasly has been dragging it into Q3 by some miracle. But Franco Colapinto, name one thing he's done this season, and I bet you can't. He's, other than crashing, like, this guy is only there, in my opinion, because he brings in the sponsorship money. He brings in big Argentinian money for Alpine, who seemingly want/need it. And I just think this weekend, again, finished last of the runners, behind Lawson, who literally was, like, completely out of it on lap 1. I just haven't seen anything impressive from this guy the whole season. And especially in the nature he came into the seat, where it's like, oh, he's meant to be this replacement to Jack Doohan. He is doing exactly the same, I'm afraid. It's just thoroughly not impressed. By far the worst rookie, if you call him a rookie, from even doing last year. And just completely anonymous in pretty much every race weekend. Like, at least with the Alpine being bad, Gasly has had these sort of moments where you're like, oh wow, Alpine does exist, because Gasly's done a great job. But if it wasn't for him, they just completely fade into oblivion, in the sense that you wouldn't even realise they're on the grid. So, not impressed with Franco Colapinto. I'd also like to touch on Lewis Hamilton, which qualifying doesn't need to be talked about because that's self-explanatory, absolutely shocking. But also just the race, where he had a really good start. Well, it wasn't a good start, it's just he avoided all of the chaos and ended up in 12th, I think. And you're looking at that with him in a Ferrari, and you assume that he's probably going to comfortably get to the top 8, I'd say. But then you just see him get stuck behind Esteban Ocon, and then gets ahead of him in the pits, and just languishes in 10th for the whole race, and finishes 10th. And I'm like, this guy is just not good this year at all. And I see the common reasoning for this from most people is they like to blame Ferrari and say it's the career killer, it's his first year in the team, give him some slack. However, I will give him some slack for it's a new team, but I'd like to just compare it to Fernando Alonso, who's the other old driver on the grid, so taking age as a factor out of it. But Fernando Alonso going from an Alpine in 2022, which obviously has, at that point, had the Renault engine and was a completely different philosophy to any of the other cars there, because Alpine is very French team, very different working environment. And he goes to Aston Martin in 2023, again, Mercedes powertrain, Mercedes suspension, completely different philosophy. And you rock up in Bahrain for his first race, and he's getting a podium. And podiums for the whole first half of the season. And the reason why I bring him up is because I just don't I don't find traction in the excuse for Hamilton in saying that it's a new team, because I just compare it to that and I look at them on paper, and yes, Ferrari operationally make mistakes more so than perhaps Aston Martin did, but in principle, Hamilton hasn't really shown a single bit of pure performance this season, whereas Alonso, in his first year at a new team, a completely different team, did extremely well, straight out of the blocks. I just think that the Hamilton sort of defending, it has calmed down more recently because it is just so blatant how bad he's been doing. But I just think it's a bit extreme, the lengths some people go to justify his performances, because it's been nothing but underwhelming. And what John Elkin said about the drivers is stupid, but if he said it in a different way, in the sense that Hamilton is completely underperforming, he would have had a case there, because for a driver that has such high expectations, it's really not good enough, and I'm not impressed. Like with Franco Colapinto, I'm just not at all thinking Lewis Hamilton deserves to be in that Ferrari this year at this point. And the meme of they got rid of the wrong driver or they hired the wrong driver absolutely holds true, because look at Carlos Sainz with the DSQs, finishes P5, would have been P7 without them. Like, it's just not good enough, and I think most people should be able to agree with that. But that's sort of the points I wanted to talk about with the race. So now I'll go on to my qualifying predictions, the results, of which I did not do very well, as you can see. However, before you before you laugh at how bad that is, just you wait, because I have had a generational race prediction results come through, which, as you will see right now, I've only gone and predicted the top 5 perfectly. I mean, come on. I deserve some credit for that. We'll ignore the fact that it was completely reliant on both McLarens getting disqualified. However, I still got it right. And no one reads the terms and conditions, they look at the actual result, and the result is 100%. And I am gonna remember this for probably forever, because I'm probably never gonna get 5 correct again. So that's that. I'm very happy with getting the top 5 correct. Unfortunately, that prediction prowess falls off for the other 2, in the sense that my stroll of the week was pretty miserable. Obviously quite far off on both, in the sense that he actually was good in qualifying and then just gets obliterated in the race. So that was great. Just seemingly never good at predicting Stroll's outcomes in the races, but you know what? I'll get it right at some point. And then we move on to my general prediction, which was Piastri out in Q1, which, no. I mean, I knew I wanted to make a prediction about the McLarens not doing well here, and if only I'd said, like, I don't know, a McLaren finishes outside the points or something. But no, I went for the only bit of the weekend that was good for McLaren, which was qualifying. So yeah, 0 points for those two, but that gives the point totals looking like this, which pretty bad for the whole weekend, except for my brilliance in the race predictions. So definitely room to improve for next week, which obviously will have sprint predictions as well. But what that does to the overall points is this: I get 10 and 3/4 for this week, and 22.5 overall, which I mean, I nearly scored my total season points in one weekend just because of my race predictions. But yeah, decent week for my predictions. Definitely could be better, but I will come back stronger next week, I promise. And then I will also go on to my new sort of weekly tradition of showing my average adjusted championship standings, as you can see in front of you. This is it from last week. If you don't know how this is scored/ranked, then I urge you to go and watch the featured video on my channel, which explains all of this and explains how it's scored and etc. But that's last week. But with the McLaren DSQs, we'll go on to this week's, where very big changes, with Max Verstappen being the most consistent driver of the year, ahead of both McLaren drivers. And I suppose the only other change this week was Behrman going ahead of Tsunoda, which kind of adds up. That makes sense with his recent performances. And yeah, gradually lowering the position losses for people like Stroll, for example, as the sort of point tables balance out, because he's only 3 positions down on his actual season standings. But yeah, not too much to talk about other than that. Pause it there if you are interested in looking at that. And that's kind of the weekend as a whole, really. I think very, very good for the championship, of course, because it's now a race win between 3 drivers. But I do think Las Vegas slightly disappointed this year. Not in qualifying, but in the race. I definitely could have been better. And again, just shows how bad these regulations are of car. Because how is overtaking a DRS train and difficult at a track that literally is just straight lines? Like, that just goes to show how efficient these cars are, and also just how hard it is to follow. Because I don't know, it's a shame, but I'm hopeful for next year. Next year's going to be massively exciting, so we'll see probably a record amount of overtakes at some tracks next year, is my prediction. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. As always, it really helps out the channel. And I will see you guys for my Qatar predictions, which should be a lot more exciting now that we've got a proper 3-way fight for the title. So I'll see you guys for that video. I hope you guys have a good, if you're in the UK that is, I hope you have a good recovery from being up so early. If you're anywhere else, then I hope you're happy that you had a race at your time zones. I'm happy for that, because us Europeans get it way too good. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.